next one. You mentioned here, you start talking about the buy now, pay later industry, which is just a fascinating sector. And I'm sure many of you out there in the audience are familiar with it, but this is where you go and you buy something on Amazon and all of a sudden it says, okay, that's $99, or you can pay $9.99 per month for, it doesn't really tell you how many months. You'll end up paying, 10 times more. I remember this from when I was a kid. We would go to the grocery store and they'd have a couch, and the couch would be $400, or you could pay $40 now. They just didn't tell you you end up paying $1,400 for the couch when all is said and done. So it's really just taking the layaway business of 30 years ago and putting it on the internet. And you show here a chart that shows the consumer loans, credit cards, and revolving lines, going over $1 trillion, setting new all-time highs. What do you think's going on here, Gary, and what are the ramifications?
Yeah, so the buy now, pay later thing, you're right. It people are acting like it's this new thing. But when I was a kid, mom would take us clothes shopping and you could put things on layaway. You give the store a little bit of money, they keep it in the back room, they put your name on it, you give them a little more money. At some point, you'd paid it off and would take it home, but there were no financing charges for it. And then, we started to get buy now, pay later a few years ago, more use of it. And people acted like it was something new rather than, the supermarket couch scam that you talked about. At first it was kind of funny, right? We heard about people using buy now, pay later to buy a pair of jeans, right? Which gets kind of nutty, for $40 pair of jeans that was being divided up, you were paying it off over months. Okay. And then it got really funny when people started using buy now, pay later for fast food. Like you could put a Happy Meal on layaway, right? That got kind of nutty, but using it for rent is going to be a gigantic debt trap for people. The company that we looked at is Flex. I don't mean to pick on them. Well, that's not true. I do mean to pick on them, but they're hardly the only ones doing this. But, I watched their ads, and it's this, cartoon woman talking about how using buy now, pay later to pay your rent is about taking control of your finances. It's liberating. And that's ridiculous, right? What it means is that people are paying fees to not pay their rent on time. Now, it's one thing if cash is tight, and obviously bouncing a check is really expensive, missing your rent deadline, really expensive. Using something like this on an occasional basis to get through a tough time, sure, I get that. But the thing that Flex doesn't tell you in their marketing about how liberating it is and how, you can take control of your finances by going into debt. The thing they don't tell you, unless you read the fine print, and we read the fine print at Deep Knowledge Investing, is that if you don't pay them on time, they can charge you up to a 36% APR. And oh, wait a minute, this isn't really buy now, pay later. This is a debt trap with gigantic 36% interest rates on the other end of it. And so, listen, if you use it once or twice, fine. But if you think that's taking control, you're going to be surprised. And again, it's one thing when you can't pay the bill on a, Big Mac because you use buy now, pay later in a fast food store. When it's your rent, and that is your single largest monthly expense, and you are falling further and further behind, and then the interest starts to go out, you're going to have a gigantic problem. And I assure you that the people that you talk to at Flex when you're thousands of dollars in arrears are not going to be nearly as funny as the cartoon woman talking about taking control of your finances. They're going to want to collect, and you're going to have a giant problem.
Yeah, look, the whole thing is fascinating. We used to outlaw gambling, and now we, do billions and billions of dollars of it with publicly traded companies.
Right.
We used to outlaw marijuana, and now we do billions and billions of dollars of it with publicly traded companies. We used to outlaw, usurious lending, and now we do billions and billions of dollars with it in publicly traded companies. The only thing I'd say is that through time, there was a reason why gambling was illegal, a reason why marijuana was illegal, and a reason why usurious lending was illegal is because it really plays in very negative ways into human psychology. It's going to be interesting to see the way this plays out. I think that believe I'm going to say this will sound a strange way. The problem's big, but it's not big enough yet. But when it gets big enough, I'm going to tell you two things are going to happen. Well, three things. Number one, the government's going to step in and put in more regulation, whether that's good or bad. Number two, I'm going to tell you that there's a bunch of these companies that are actually not profitable that will go out of business. Think of it as the equivalent of what happened with WeWork. There was just a non-economic model. And number three, I'm not going to be surprised to see another government bailout. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just telling you it's going to happen. Look, the clear advice, avoid BNPL whenever you can. The simplest advice to give anyone always is pay off your highest debt, cost debt first thing. I like, skip a coffee if you can and pay off your 36% debt. But what I do think will be interesting to see is how this develops across the next 10, 20 years as this business, begins to grow and mature. So,
yeah, I'm completely with you on this. For what it's worth, I'm actually okay with things like gambling being legal, lending being legal. If people want to use marijuana, I don't like the government being in the business of telling people what they can and can't do. They've historically been horrible at it. I don't think these businesses should be illegal, but I think the people listening to this should be really careful about using it. And Enrique, I liked your conclusion on it, which is don't use these services. The BNPL businesses shouldn't be illegal, but consumers should avoid them.
And I guess let me get back to what you said. I agree with you too. These should be legal businesses. I think we're going to end up, and I'm not the biggest fan of regulation, but we should end up with greater and more rigorous regulation in all of these. And I think we will. I think we've got a gambling problem in this country. We've got a marijuana problem in this country, and we're going to have a bigger and bigger BNPL problem in this country. So just the same way we put laws around alcohol and tobacco, there needs to be more rigorous regulation here. And I'm the most hardcore libertarian guy you're ever going to meet. So it's that means something when I say that. So
wow. So we've got two libertarians on the show telling people more regulation is coming and don't use this stuff.
Yeah.